Hey guys, tonight we slip off our modern sandals and into something a bit more embroidered. The year is somewhere around 1550, the place is Constantinople, now called Istanbul, and you're about to become a concubine in the imperial Ottoman harem. Not just any harem. The harem. Hidden behind the thick walls of Topkapi Palace, shrouded in gossip and gold, feared and fantasized about from Paris to Persia, the heat hits first. Not outside, inside. Under that ornate veil they've thrown over your head, the fabric itches like it's been cursed by every mosquito in the Levant. Your wrists are red where the bangles were slapped on too tight, and your sandals don't quite fit. That's intentional. You're supposed to be off balance, you don't get to walk through the front gates, of course. You're marched through a smaller, side entrance beneath the arches, past a courtyard that smells faintly of roses and horse sweat. You pass fountains where peacocks drink. You think you see someone watching from a latticed window, but then it's gone, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing they do is separate you from your language. You're told not to speak unless spoken to. And even then, only in Ottoman Turkish. Which you don't know. Yet. You only catch a few things, a word that might mean new, another that might mean foreigner, and something murmured like a prayer that clearly means keep moving. There are others with you. Some from Georgia, some from the Balkans, one with sea salt still in her braids and a cut lip. One's crying. The others don't even blink. You walk past enormous marble columns and into a tiled hallway that glows faintly with candlelight. A girl, not much older than you, waits silently by a wooden door. She doesn't smile. She just opens it and lets you in. Inside. Nothing. A mat. A jug of water. A bowl with 2 dried dates. This is your first night in the harem, no one tells you what happens next, morning smells like jasmine and vinegar. You're woken not by a call, but by motion, the girl from last night returning with another, older one in black robes. She doesn't look at you, just gestures toward a copper basin. Time to wash. You're led, still silent, through a warren of passageways that could be bedrooms, or trapdoors, or maybe libraries for all you can tell. Everything's muffled. You wonder if it's the rugs or the rules. You pass by a mural that makes you stop. Just for a second. It's tiled, floral, vibrant, delicate. An entire garden of blue tulips curling across the wall like vines painted by moonlight. You can't help it. You reach out, a sharp cough. She saw you, the baths are steam-choked. You're stripped, sat down, and scrubbed until your skin squeaks. The girl doing it hums something low and circular, like the song has no beginning or end. She pours warm water over you with practiced grace, then gestures for you to lift your arms. You hesitate, she waits, then you do. It takes almost 2 hours. By the end, you're wrapped in layers of muslin, your hair damp, your thoughts spinning. There's a moment, fleeting, when you catch your reflection in a burnished tray left on the floor. You look like someone else. Maybe that's the point, they dress you again, this time in harem silks. Too fine for walking in, too sheer to be worn. Your feet feel small. You're handed slippers that fit just a bit too well, back in your chamber, no bigger than a monk's cell, but tiled with beauty. You wait, and wait, that's something you'll do a lot in the harem. Waiting is its own language here. Lunch arrives on a small silver tray, olives, bread, a bit of rice with saffron. No cutlery. You use your hands like everyone else. When you're done, someone collects the tray without a word. You think about speaking. But what would you even say? Later that day, you're told to kneel. A woman walks in. Older. Dressed in deeper reds than yours. She wears pearls in her hair and carries a fan that never moves. Her eyes sweep the room once, then land on you. This is the Kalfa, the senior attendant, half mentor, half warden. She speaks softly, but her voice cuts like citrus. You are now property of the Sultan's household, she says. You will be trained. You will be tested. And if you are very lucky, or very cursed, you will be chosen. Then she leaves. And that's that. At dusk, you're allowed into the shared courtyard for the first time. It smells like honeysuckle and ambition. Girls sit in pairs or trios, braiding hair, sharing bits of honey-dipped fig, whispering in tongues you don't yet know. You sit by the fountain. One girl glances at you, then looks away, another lobs a pit in your direction, playfully, maybe. No one talks to you yet, but you're being watched, not by the guards. Not even by the eunuchs in their dark robes and unreadable eyes. You're being watched by the hierarchy itself, by the invisible rules, the ones written in gesture and deference, in which cushion you take and how quickly you rise. It's like a court with no king, just 1,000 queens in waiting. That night, you didn't sleep much. Someone sobs softly in a room down the hall. Someone else is giggling, too loud. You hear footsteps. A door opens and closes. Then silence. You press your face to the cool tile wall and try to slow your heart. Somewhere outside, the city still hums. A distant prayer call, a night bird, the occasional horse clop on stone, and in that moment, alone, foreign, redressed, renamed, you realize something. You're inside history. Not the kind they paint in oil portraits or carve into statues. The kind that smells like soap and sweat, jasmine and fear. You're inside a system that runs not just on power, but on the soft, invisible details no one ever writes down, and tonight, you're its newest secret. They wake you again before sunrise. The light hasn't cracked the sky yet, but already the halls are stirring. You're handed another thin robe and a scarf the color of wet ash. No one tells you where you're going this time either, they simply expect your feet to follow. You follow. The halls change subtly the farther in you walk. Fewer rugs, more marble. More gold leaf curling along the ceiling like vines. The air smells like rosewater again, but sharper this time, tinged with vinegar and something oddly medicinal. You hear water dripping, the hush of steam, the faint clink of bowls being set down. You've reached the hammam, the palace baths, but this isn't the place they scrubbed you raw yesterday. This one feels quieter. Older. There are no barking orders here. Just the heavy, expectant hush of ritual. You step through the steam curtain and into heat. Real heat. The kind that pulls every breath from your lungs and replaces it with something slower, lazier. You blink, and the sweat's already begun to bead on your neck. You're not alone. 5 others sit on polished marble benches, wrapped in gauzy linen. They don't speak. Their eyes flick toward you briefly, then away. The older attendant, she might be a Kalfa, or something higher, nods toward the basin. It's a cue. You move. This bath isn't about getting clean. It's about getting seen. Every movement matters. How you step out of your robe. How you sink into the water without a splash. How you handle your own nudity as if it's neither shameful nor performative. The water smells faintly of bay leaves. There are rose petals floating in it, not for romance, but to show it's been freshly drawn. The attendant begins to wash your hair. It's not rushed. Her hands are practiced, steady, unbothered by your shivers. She tips your chin back like you're a jug she's pouring. You're aware of your body in a way that's not quite yours anymore. That's the point. The harem begins with ritual. Not law. Not training. Not even obedience. But surrender. They take your clothes, your name, your language, and now they're taking your skin. Not literally. But they're replacing how it feels to live inside it. Your first bath stripped you of the outside world. This one dissolves the inside world, too. When it's over, you're not dried with a towel. You're dabbed. Patted. layered in fine muslin and soft-scented oils like you're being prepped for display. Which, in a way, you are. You don't return to your old room. You're led elsewhere. Another wing, another hallway, another door that clicks softly shut behind you. Inside, brighter tiles. A polished mirror. A thicker cushion. You've been promoted. No one says this aloud. But the room says it for them. Later, you're summoned again. A small courtyard this time, open air, shaded by vines, with cushions arranged around a fountain shaped like a tulip in bloom. There are books on the cushions. And musical instruments. And 3 women sitting with crossed legs and steady gazes. Language lessons begin here. You're expected to listen first, mimic next. You learn that Kalfa isn't just a title, it's a whole layer in the harem's living web. Beneath them are novices like you, called Asmiz. Above them? The USTA, the masters. And above even them? The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother. She commands the harem like a general commands an army. You repeat the words slowly. Your accent betrays you. One woman taps the cushion sharply when you slip, then comes poetry. Ottoman Turkish poetry isn't gentle. It's sharp, metaphor-heavy, drenched in longing. You don't understand all the words yet, but you understand the feeling. The ache under the rhyme. By midday, you've been corrected 100 times. You're hoarse, your back aches from sitting so upright. But when a platter of dates and almond milk is passed around, you take it with steady hands. You're beginning to understand the rules of being invisible and dazzling at the same time. After resting, it's time for music. The oud is handed to you like a ceremonial blade. You've never played. Doesn't matter. They show you the shape of the fingers first, how to cradle, how to pluck, how to hold silence between notes. You pluck the wrong string. Someone winces. They don't want virtuosos. They want discipline. Grace. Muscle memory shaped by repetition, and they want you to perform. By evening, your fingertips are sore. Your tongue is tired. You've memorized 7 new phrases, 1 stanza of poetry, and the first 3 chords of a love ballad you don't yet understand. The food tray arrives again, this time with quince jam. A subtle nod. Someone noticed. Someone approved. The tray tells you more than the teachers ever will. You lie down that night on your slightly thicker cushion and stare at the tiles. One is chipped. It feels like a secret. Somewhere in the harem, laughter rises. Someone has been chosen tonight. You wonder if you envy her or pity her. Not everything is refined. You're awoken once by shouting. Not rage, exactly, just panic. Someone running through the halls barefoot. The guards don't chase. They just wait. You never see that girl again. Historians still argue whether life in the imperial harem was mostly one of captivity or covert power. They write whole treatises about whether concubines were victims of an empire or managers of it. Whether they were imprisoned courtiers or crown survivors, the truth lives somewhere in between the arguments. In the bathwater. In the calluses on your oud hand. In the bruise you didn't cry about. You live it. You wake early. You chant vowels into the mirror. You practice calligraphy on scrap parchment. Your wrist cramps. You keep writing. The ink stains your sleeves. On your 4th week, you're told you'll appear in a public ceremony. Well, public for the palace. The Sultan's half-sister is celebrating a birth. You and 12 other Asmiz will walk in procession, balancing gilded dishes on your heads while singing a line of verse you've rehearsed daily. You're not ready, but neither is anyone else. The day arrives. You're oiled, powdered, dressed in layers so finely stitched it feels criminal to sweat in them. Your hair is pinned in a looped braid pattern that takes an hour and at least 2 hairpins stabbed into your scalp. The courtyard is full of light and shadows. The women gather, the eunuchs wait silently at the periphery. Music begins. You step out, the dish on your head holds sugared almonds. They don't spill, your voice holds steady. Your feet move like you rehearsed, no one notices you falter slightly on the last turn. That is, no one but the USTA watching from the upper gallery, fanning herself with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Later, a honey-soaked fig appears on your tray, another nod, the harem doesn't clap. It whispers. It rewards subtly. It punishes subtly. It watches everything, and so do you. You start to watch how others walk, how they fold their robes when they sit, how they tilt their heads when laughing. You copy them, not exactly, but enough to blend. Enough to belong. One girl teaches you how to tilt your spoon so it never drips. Another shows you which guard can be bribed for scraps of news from outside. Someone mentions the Sultan, just the word. Not his name, it hangs in the air like perfume, sensed but not touched. You haven't seen him yet, but they say he has. You don't flinch when she yanks the braid tighter than necessary, you don't flinch when she leans in, all casual smiles, and says, "You sleep heavy, Nasli. I passed your room twice last night. Didn't stir once." You just smile back, a lazy half-smile, like it meant nothing. Like you didn't hear the whisper. Like your fingers aren't tightening slightly over the comb still hidden beneath your cushion. You learn, in that moment, that smiling back is sometimes a shield sharper than any blade. After braiding comes dance. The kind of performance meant to look effortless, like petals drifting on water. But it's work. Precision work. The instructor counts under her breath, claps once when you're off. Never praises. Praise, in the harem, is a commodity. It's hoarded like saffron, distributed only when it can be weaponized. Today she pairs you with Tabriz. You spin, step, turn. Her elbow brushes yours too hard. You pretend it's the rhythm's fault. You repeat the sequence. Again, her hip nudges yours, barely. Just enough to say, "I see you." Just enough to say, "We're not finished." But you hold your poise, you match her. Step for step, angle for angle, until the instructor claps twice and dismisses everyone without a word. You leave without looking back, but in your ribs there's a thrum like a taut drum skin. Tabriz might not strike tonight. But the dance has begun. The next few days pass with careful quiet. You speak only when asked, practice only when watched. But everywhere, small signals flicker, a scarf folded with one corner turned inward, a cushion moved 1 inch out of place, a small plate of sweets left in your room with the pistachios arranged in the shape of a teardrop. These aren't threats. These are messages. You're being studied, you return the favor. You watch how Tabriz eats, too slowly, deliberately. You notice she talks mostly to the girls from Baghdad, but her eyes always wander. She pretends she's effortless, but every movement of hers is choreographed, calculated. She wants to be noticed by someone. But not just anyone, you suspect she's been passed over. More than once, and someone like that, someone who tasted the edge of favor but didn't get to drink, is the most dangerous. They say the harem is made of silk. But it's held together by tension. You've begun to understand that you don't need to win here. Not yet. You just need to last. You slip a note under the instructor's cushion the next day, just a short poem you've copied in your best script. A verse about patience. About the moon waiting on the clouds to part. You don't sign it. That afternoon, your lesson partner changed, Tabriz is reassigned, and your braids are done by a girl from Rhodes who doesn't speak much but hums like she's keeping secrets. That night, you finally sleep, not because you're safe, but because you've proven you can listen. You wake to music, not the kind you practice. Not the flute or the oud. This is real music, drifting faintly from the outer halls, a chorus of hand drums, zills chiming like laughter, and the long mournful arc of a commence crying out some ancient lament. It means visitors, it means someone important, someone powerful enough to be entertained. You're not told who. You're not told anything, as usual. But you're not stupid. There are only 2 types of visitors who trigger this much perfume and panic, envoys from foreign courts. Or the Sultan himself, and today, you're nowhere near the music. Instead, you're ordered to help polish tiles in the Northeast Salon, an absurdly decorative space with fountains that serve no function and pillows no one sits on. But the women in the inner palace know better. The work you're given isn't always about cleaning. It's about placement. You're being watched again. Evaluated. Set on a board where the rules change by the hour. While you work, a junior Kalfa named Ghoul leans close, whispering, "It's the new vizier. Young. Tall. They say he's unmarried." Then she dusts a wooden frame with unnatural focus. You don't reply. You file the fact away. The hierarchy in the harem is thick enough to drown in. At the top stands the Valite Sultan, no question. She oversees the entire network, including the black eunuchs, the stewardesses, the senior concubines, and the never-ending trail of girls in training. But beneath her, the rankings twist like grapevines: USTA, Kalfuller, Ace Miz, Hasan Eaters, and the Gozdes, the favorites. Each title is less a job than a title of favor. Each shift in rank is both ladder and trapdoor, and to move between these levels, you have to master the real art of the harem, the gaze. You learn how to be noticed, you learn how not to. You watch senior women carry themselves with poise so heavy it's practically armor. They never look directly at a man unless it's required. They never appear rushed. Their smiles are half real, and their anger is painted in grace. The gaze isn't about seduction. Not really. It's about currency. Control. There's a concubine called Selvet who's rumored to have been here for over a decade. She isn't young anymore, but she walks like she owns the light. People move when she enters a room. She speaks softly, but no one interrupts. And when a eunuch once raised his voice at her, he vanished within a week. She's never raised hers. She wears her hair like it's a crown and doesn't bother with the newest silks. Selvet is proof that power in the harem isn't just about being chosen. It's about being remembered. You watch her carefully. You mimic the way she sits. The slight delay before answering a question. The way she listens with her whole face but speaks like the air isn't worth disturbing. One day, she sees you watching. She doesn't smile, but she nods. Once, that's all. Historians still argue whether the women of the harem were truly educated in politics or merely well-mannered prisoners. The documents that survive suggest a little of both: poetry, history, the Quran, musical training, but also political geography, coded speech, and surveillance tactics so subtle even palace spies couldn't always keep up. You're not taught to spy, exactly, but you're expected to remember what the vizier eats, who he glances at during dinner, which eunuch pauses before knocking. You begin noticing things without realizing it. Like the way the silver tray was arranged differently last night. Or how Ghoul's accent gets stronger when she's nervous. Or how one of the stewards suddenly avoids eye contact after you ask too many questions about the bath rotation. Nothing is said outright, everything is said, all the time. You're summoned to help serve at a feast, not to dine, just to glide through the chamber in a choreographed arc, pouring water, offering napkins, keeping your head down but your eyes very open. You are dressed in deep plum silk and a belt of small pearls. Your hair is pinned with carnelian. You're warned, 3 times, never to let your veil slip, even an inch. The room is filled with male voices. Rich, broad, some foreign. The vizier is indeed tall. He laughs rarely but deeply, like each laugh costs him a coin. You pass behind him once and catch his scent, cypress and musk. He doesn't look at you. Or at least, not then, but you are looked at, by others. One nobleman makes eye contact longer than he should. A eunuch clears his throat, low and sharp. The nobleman looks away. You keep walking. When the feast ends, you clean trays, in silence, but later, there is a plum placed on your tray. Just one. No note. No explanation. You don't eat it. You leave it exactly where it was. Let them wonder. the harem is a place of invisible ambition. There are no campaign speeches. No duels. Just silence and silk and so much watching. There's a girl who keeps offering to help you with your verses. She's kind. Too kind. She compliments your hair. Too often, you stop leaving your things unattended. You notice who sits beside whom at meals. Who bathes first. Who is always late, and never punished. One girl faints in the gardens. No one rushes to help her. Later you hear she was caught sneaking a note to a guard. They say she was reassigned to the kitchens. They say reassignment is a mercy. You learn to walk like you don't carry secrets. Even when you do, there's a corner of the library no one checks. It's not really a library, just a tiled alcove with shelves. The books are mostly poetry. Some philosophy. A few in Persian you don't understand. You go there when you're not being watched. You read slowly. Carefully, you memorize one line. The mouth closed in silence is the gate of power. You repeat it in your head while brushing your hair. While walking the corridors. While smiling at Tabriz, who is now, somehow, back in your lesson group. You say it silently when the valide walks past you and pauses, not to speak. Just to pause, you feel the air shift. Your stomach tightens. But you say nothing, and she moves on. That night, your tray holds an extra date. The next morning, your robe is changed, from pale blue to saffron yellow. Color means something, you just haven't learned what yet, but soon, you will. You're sent to the odalic chambers next. These aren't training halls or dormitories or music salons. They're real rooms, private ones, assigned to concubines who've served the sultan, or might. Women with influence. Women who know how to wield it. You're not given one. Not yet, you're there to serve, a quiet promotion. They don't announce it. They simply hand you a gold-threaded sash and expect you to know how to tie it. You do. The odalic you're assigned to is named Hanif. She's perhaps 30, maybe younger, maybe older. It's hard to tell in this place where age doesn't wrinkle but calcifies. She wears green like it was dyed in envy itself. Her fingernails are painted with crushed petals. And her eyes move slower than her hands. She doesn't say hello. She doesn't smile. She gestures to a tray of jewelry and says, Polish. You do. Then she hands you a brush and nods toward her hair. Long coiled like smoke. You don't pull. You don't flinch when she sighs at nothing. She lets you work in silence. But silence here is rarely empty. It's a test. After an hour, she speaks. Where were you trained? Garden wing, you answer. Good. They don't ruin the fingers there. She reaches behind her and places a hairpin in your hand. Gold. Shaped like a lily, keep it, she says. I hate lilies. You bow. Hanif never asks your name. Never repeats hers, but she lets you stay in the room after she leaves. There's a vanity, a mirror, you look into it, and for the first time, you don't think about who you used to be, you think about who else is watching you from the other side. There are 15 known ranks within the imperial harem, depending on which historian you ask. But none of them tell the full story. Ranks are visible, but power is not. You can be a favorite and still expendable. You can be forgotten and still be dangerous. Hanif isn't a favorite anymore. That much is clear. But she has things no one else does: letters, perfume from Damascus, a comb made of tortoiseshell. A mood ring, if such a thing had existed then, would have turned smoky purple whenever she entered the room. People respect her, and fear her. She teaches you what doesn't show up in scrolls or calligraphy lessons. The Sultan doesn't want beauty, she tells you one afternoon. He has art for that. He wants rest. You memorize that line. You don't yet understand it. Later that night, you hear a girl cry. Not loud. Just enough for her sobs to echo slightly through the stone. She'd been sent for. When she returns, hours later, she walks like someone whose bones have been rearranged. You never see her again, but her cushion remains untouched for 3 days, as if the space around her needs time to breathe. You're instructed to learn sleep rituals next, how to unroll the bedding just so, where to place a brazier, how to scent a room with jasmine that's strong enough to be noticed but not cloying, how to walk barefoot without a sound, how to light incense that doesn't smoke too high. You learn the meaning of different oils. Amber calms, rose comforts, narrowly sharpens the memory, clove is dangerous. You never light a clove, says Henknife one night, unless you want to make someone think of death. You think she's being poetic, then you hear that a girl used a clove by accident. She's reassigned to laundry duty the next morning. No one says a word. You begin reading faces like tea leaves. The girl from Rhodes now braids your hair daily. She whispers about a servant who smuggles messages in embroidery. You pretend not to care. You note the detail anyway. Someone else trades you a pomegranate in exchange for an old poem you wrote. The fruit is sour. That, too, you note. Historians still debate whether the concubines of the harem were passive pawns or active players in Ottoman court politics. Some argue they were cloistered women with no real voice. Others insist they were kingmakers, mothers of sultans, and whispering architects of empire. You're starting to believe both are true. You have no voice outside the palace walls, but inside, every glance, every step, every blink is part of a language so old it predates ink, and now, you speak it, not fluently. Not yet. But you've stopped translating yourself into silence. One afternoon, as you're arranging scarves for Henknife, a knock comes at the outer screen. It's a eunuch. He doesn't speak, just hands Henknife a sealed parchment with the Sultan's tugra, his imperial monogram, pressed into wax. Henknife opens it. She reads. She folds it again, then, without looking at you, she says, "You'll be serving in the 4th courtyard tonight." You nod. She continues, softly, "Do not speak unless asked. Do not sit unless told. If there is a tray, lift it from the left. If there is a song, do not look for the voice. You are decoration tonight. Not scent. Not sound." You memorize each instruction. That evening, your robe is embroidered in moonlight silver. Your hair is set in coils so tight you feel your heartbeat in your scalp. Your face is powdered. Not whitened. Just softened. You're handed a tray of sugared citrus and water steeped with mint. The 4th courtyard is cold, not with weather, with marble. White, polished, endless. Lit by hanging lanterns. Flickering as if they, too, are afraid to burn too bright. There are others. Not many. Everyone moves with exaggerated grace. You step forward, and for the first time, you see him, the Sultan. He does not look like you expected. He is not wrapped in gold or wearing a crown of fire. He is older than you imagined, and somehow quieter. He looks once in your direction, just once. It's not a glance that says desire. It's a glance that says, "I notice." And that alone unbalances the room. You bow, you walk the tray forward, you do not tremble, you place it on the table. He says nothing, but neither do you. Later that night, you return to your chamber. Your sash is still gold, your cushion is still warm, your name is still Nasli, but something has shifted. You sleep lightly, like someone is about to knock. Your mornings begin with a whisper and a wooden clapper. No rooster. No bell. Just a tap-tap from the courtyard and a rustle of slippers on tile. It means lessons. It always means lessons. Language first. You sit cross-legged with half a dozen other girls, back straight against a wall that's colder than it looks. The tutor, an older woman with henna'd fingers and a voice like cracked silk, writes a single word on the board. Ask, love. You're expected to say it. Not just pronounce it, but taste it. You fail. Everyone fails the first time. The glottal stop at the end snaps like a fan closing too fast. She repeats it slowly. You follow. You choke slightly. The girl beside you snorts. Then bites her lip. By the end of the hour, you've said ask so many times that the word dissolves into sound, like chewing on rose petals. Ottoman Turkish isn't the language of your childhood. It's all loops and layers, Arabic script dressed in Persian moods. It wraps poetry around power, disguises instruction as flattery. Even yes and no are Baroque, evet is a hum through the nose, hayer a delicate refusal that sounds like sighing into water. You learn verbs by miming. You learn honorifics by getting them wrong. You learn grammar by enduring silence until someone corrects you, and slowly, impossibly, you begin to speak. After language comes poetry. Not to read it, no one cares if you understand, at first. You're told to recite, they hand you verses by Fuseli and Baki, the imperial poets, whose metaphors climb so high you wonder how anyone understood them even back then. You learn about nightingales crying for roses, about wine that isn't wine, about pain that rhymes so perfectly it almost feels like music. You memorize 2 couplets a day. Each line must float, never stutter, the instructor listens for your breath. If you gasp, if you break the meter, if you dare to pause in the wrong place, she clicks her tongue and starts again. You hate it. Then, one day, something cracks open. It's a line about longing, something about a garden and an unreachable moon. You say it, and you feel it. The rhythm settles in your chest like a second heartbeat. The instructor doesn't click her tongue, she nods. Barely, you treasure that nod like a jeweled bracelet. You're sent to music practice next. They hand you an oud. It's larger than you thought, round-bodied, fretless, smelling of old wood and waxed fingers. It makes no sound until you coax it. And it doesn't respond to force. Only invitation. You hold it wrong. You strum too hard. You pluck with your thumb like a village girl. The music teacher raises an eyebrow. She taps your wrist lightly. Looser, she means. You start again. Your fingers fumble across strings. The loud moans once, off key, the other girls giggle. Quietly. But not kindly. You keep playing. By the 3rd week, you can play 3 notes cleanly. That's it. 3, but they're beautiful, and they're yours. You practice in your room at night, barely touching the strings. Just enough to keep the memory in your fingers. You don't know yet whether music is meant to please, seduce, entertain, or soothe, but you do know that the sound you make belongs to no one else, and in the harem, that's a form of freedom. Then comes tea. Tea is not just tea, it is an art. A ritual. A performance with steam and scent and silence. You're handed a tray, silver, heavy. A single glass cup, rimmed with gold. A sugar cube. A tiny spoon shaped like a crescent. You're told to walk 10 paces, bow slightly, and pour without spilling or shaking. Your first pour splashes, you're made to clean it up. And begin again, again. And again, you learn to feel the angle of the pot without looking. You learn that the handle gets hot, so wrap your fingers in linen. You learn not to overfill, not to swirl, not to speak while pouring. You learn that the clink of the spoon must never be harsh. It must chime, soft, polite, barely audible. They test you by adding weight to the tray when you're not looking. A folded cloth. A hidden stone, you adapt. One day, you serve the valide herself, just a small tray. Just 2 cups, you kneel. You pour. No spills, the steam rises like a veil. She says nothing. Just lifts her cup and sips once. You aren't dismissed, you stay, kneeling, until her cup is empty, then she gestures. Barely, you leave. She is tea, her story reaches your ears in pieces. A silk robe requested. A rose was delivered. A song played twice in the Sultan's chambers. Some say he smiled, some say he didn't. You wonder what she did differently. Then you return to your lessons. Historians still argue whether the women of the harem were taught for pleasure or politics. Some claim the music and poetry were forms of distraction, to keep the women docile. Others insist they were tools of cultural prestige, designed to elevate the imperial household. You think they were weapons, not loud ones, but weapons are all the same. What better way to conquer a man than with a line of poetry he can't forget? What better way to eavesdrop than by being the one who pours the tea? You master your third song on the oud. You learn to recite a ghazal without tripping on breath. You learn that the way you sit, knees tucked, back soft, fingers poised, can speak louder than anything you say. You're not the best, but you're remembered. A girl leaves a flower on your oud case one day. A tulip, no note, no words. You pluck its petals apart slowly, whispering the lines of your favorite verse. My heart, a mirror, clouded by your sigh. You repeat it until it no longer sounds like a verse, it sounds like your own thoughts, and that means it's working. You're given a new assignment: prepare the performance group for an upcoming palace festival. You're not in charge, not really. But the instructors hand you the roster, and they don't hover when you organize rehearsals. That's how you know it's a test, so you begin. You group the voices, high, middle, grounding low. You shuffle the musicians, matching rhythms with tempo, matching girls who like each other just enough to avoid sabotage. You tweak the transitions, tighten the verses, choose a poem that's melancholic, but hopeful. Something about swallows returning to eaves. It's a thinly veiled metaphor, and it works beautifully. Rehearsals happen in the inner courtyards, beneath latticed light and jasmine vines. There's laughter. Some defiance. A lot of exhaustion. One girl fakes illness to avoid singing. You assign her to play zills instead. She sulks, but compiles. Another girl, Ice, sings like she's been doing it since birth. She doesn't boast, she doesn't need to. Her voice hovers right at the edge of haunting. You position her front and center, just off to the left. Enough to be noticed, but not enough to cast shadows on anyone else. You aren't just planning a performance, you're directing a feeling. Hennife watches from the balcony once. She says nothing, but you spot her lingering after the others have gone. That's as good as approval. Still, rehearsals stall. One girl gets laryngitis. Another burns her fingers on a brass incense holder. The lute goes missing for a full day and turns up behind a curtain. Strings snap like someone didn't want the song played at all, but you don't complain. You fix the strings. You reorder the verses to cut the sick girl's part. You practice at night, even after your fingers ache and your knees go numb from kneeling too long, because you've seen what happens when someone important notices you, but you've also seen what happens when they forget. So you work. The morning of the performance, the halls smell like saffron and fig syrup. The air itself feels oiled. The floor's been swept twice. Someone has scattered rose petals where the valide will walk. There are more guards posted. You hear the clink of armor for the first time in weeks. The festival isn't just for women. Ambassadors from abroad are here. There will be peeking, pretending, silk veils and politics disguised as hospitality. You and the others dress in matching robes, copper with green stitching, modest but radiant. Your hair is braided and looped, perfumed with bergamot and thyme. Your lips are brushed with a powdered pomegranate rind. You look like someone you barely recognize. You look like someone they might remember. When it's your group's turn, you walk out into the tiled pavilion, eyes cast down but posture perfect. You sit, legs tucked beneath you, oud nestled against your side. You nod, and you begin. The music is soft, steady, and just a touch mournful. The kind that makes older women smile tightly and younger ones stare into the middle distance. Ice's voice lifts the opening line like it's floating on warm wind, then your fingers follow. The oud hums under your touch, delicate, reverent, sure. The courtyard stills, no one coughs. No one shifts. It is, for those 3 minutes, utterly silent. But for your music, you don't need to look up to know the valide is watching. Or that someone, likely several someones, are calculating your value. You finish, you bow. You back away, nothing is said aloud, but that evening, your sash was replaced. This one has an embroidered edge. Small. Subtle. But unmistakable, it's a whisper of a promotion. No longer just asemi, you've stepped into a higher circle, and with the elevation comes silence, fewer jokes in the halls. Fewer shared dates. The girls still braid your hair, but they watch you now. Like they're trying to determine how far ahead you are, and how quickly they might catch up. One evening, Ice lingers after the lesson. She says, "You don't even sing." You shrug, "I didn't need to." She gives a slow, bitter smile, and you both understand something unsaid. Performance in the harem is never about the obvious, it's never about who sings loudest. You're moved to a new chamber. Just 2 cushions instead of 4. One narrow mirror. A screen that actually folds, not just a hanging curtain. No explanation is given, but everyone sees it. The girl across the corridor stops borrowing your comb. Another stops calling you sister. The eunuch delivering your breakfast now uses 2 hands. This is what power feels like here. Not a thunderclap. A temperature change. The air bends differently around you. With your elevation comes a new schedule, fewer group lessons, more private instruction. You're taught court customs, how to bow to a foreign envoy, how to speak in riddles without sounding coy, how to trace calligraphy with a brush made of horsehair dipped in lemon milk. You practice writing verses in mirror script, so that only someone trained could read them. When asked why, your instructor simply says, "There are things you must say that must never be overheard." You nod. You copy. You fill a scroll with secret questions only the blank spaces know the answer to. Late one afternoon, as the light shifts from gold to ash, you're summoned to an unfamiliar salon. The cushions are gray. The curtains are drawn. There are no lanterns lit, just the flicker of one lazy oil lamp in the corner. You recognize 2 other girls there. Both slightly older. Both with reputations for potential. One is rumored to have once caught the Sultan's eye. The other, they say, reads fortunes in rosewater. You are told you've been chosen for a dream evening. You've heard the term whispered. It's not what it sounds like. It's not an invitation. It's a rehearsal. You're dressed in pale cream. Your scent is apricot blossom. You're instructed to walk into a room, bow, smile, pour tea, and recite a single verse of your choosing. You pick the one about the swallow again. You speak it slowly. Steady, the eunuchs watch from behind the screen. The instructor takes notes. No one reacts to your words. Not during. But later, a girl is crying in the bathhouse. You don't ask. You pour water over your shoulders, watching the steam rise like smoke signals no one will answer. Historians still debate whether dream evenings were actual auditions or just a way to train potential favorites in imperial etiquette. Some claim they were invented by the Valide to filter the ambitious from the reckless. Others insist they were always symbolic, an inner circle's way of saying, "We see you now." Whatever the truth, the results are the same. The next day, your lessons stop, not all of them. Just some. The calligraphy master gives you a book to practice at home. The oud instructor sends a note, "You've learned enough. Now play for yourself." Your free time triples. Your surveillance doubles, you know, because your breakfast arrives differently now. The bowls are warmer. The fruit is fresher. Someone is paying attention, not all of it is welcome. One afternoon, you find a note beneath your sash. He dreams in red. That's all it says, no name. No mark. No hint. You burn it, but not before memorizing the handwriting. You start dreaming differently. The palace shows up in your sleep, but not as it is. There's always snow on the tiles. Always birds in the marble baths. Valide walks through your room, but her feet don't touch the floor. The Sultan sometimes appears, never looking at you. Just standing. Sometimes with a sword. Sometimes with a pomegranate. You wake with the taste of old fruit in your mouth. You tell no one. You're asked to write a poem, not one from memory. One from yourself. The topic is longing. You hesitate. What are you allowed to long for here? You settle on a trick. You write about rain. You write about the sound it makes on stone, the way it never stays. You say nothing of men. You say nothing of escape, and yet, when your instructor reads it, she folds the paper carefully and places it in her sleeve. She doesn't return it, she simply says, "That will do." You don't know who will read it next, but you do know this: longing is currency, and you've just minted some. In the evenings, you walk the quiet corridors like a ghost rehearsing her life. You stop at the Court of Fountains, for pools, one for each season. You sit by the winter one. It's always colder there. You dip your fingers in and watch the ripples pretend they don't know you. Someone sits beside you. It's Hanife. She says nothing for a long while. Then, you're afraid. It's not a question, you answer anyway. Yes. She nods. Good. She stands. Walk away. That night, you can't sleep. You sit upright until the call to prayer. They say the Sultan is returning from his estate soon. You don't ask where he's been, you simply prepare. You polish your oud. You sort your poems. You practice walking with a tray you no longer carry. You wonder which moment will be the moment, and whether you'll recognize it when it comes. One morning, a robe appears folded at your door. It's not one of yours, it's pale lilac. A color only seen on Gozdes favorites. There's no note, no explanation. You pick it up, you run your fingers across the fabric, you hang it carefully, and then, you return to your cushion, your oud, and your lines of poetry, because until you are called, you are still waiting. You wait in silence, not out of obedience, though that's what they'll think. You wait because it's the only act that cannot be misinterpreted. Words can be twisted, glances misread, even gestures misremembered. But silence. Silence is a mirror. People see what they want in it, so you wrap yourself in it. You wear the lilac robe only when asked. The rest of the time, it stays folded, tucked beneath the cedar box where you keep your oud strings and scrolls of half-finished poetry. Some days, you trace its fabric with your fingertips, wondering if you should wear it anyway. Other days, you can't even look at it. You begin preparing your mind as if for battle. Not with steel or shields, but with discipline. You recite verses in your head while walking the corridors. You learn new lines in Arabic, repeating them until they melt on your tongue like snow. You quiz yourself on palace lineage, grand viziers, favorite wives, sons sent away, cousins executed. Every name has weight. Every connection is a thread in the latticework that surrounds you. Hanife notices. She doesn't say anything at first, but she lingers by your door more often now. Once, she leaves you a pot of coal with crushed sapphire in the base. For clarity, the note says, clarity. As if that's ever really the goal, the Sultan returns in the morning, so still you think time has stopped to greet him. There are no horns, no parades. That's the thing about real power, it doesn't need to announce itself. The air changes. The eunuchs move like wind-blown flags, stiff, precise. The ustas of the harem begin walking faster but speaking less. You catch glimpses of robes too fine for normal days. Someone plays a ney in the west courtyard. Its sound cuts through the air like longing wrapped in fog, and then there's you, still waiting, still not called. Historians still argue whether concubines were selected during formal ceremonies or casual glances. Whether it was the Valide who chose, or the Sultan himself, or neither, some say it was the rhythm of palace politics that chose for them. Whispering names like spells into the ears of men who thought themselves above whispers. You've stopped believing in official ceremonies, you believe in patterns, and the pattern is shifting. A girl named Layla is summoned. You see her return the next morning, her posture slouched, her hair loose. She doesn't cry. But she moves like someone who heard something she wasn't supposed to. Another girl vanishes. No one says her name aloud, and you stay, lilac robe untouched. You go to the fountain courtyard one night and find Hanife already there. She doesn't look at you. She says, he favors the ones who don't ask. You nod, she adds, but don't be too silent. Then they forget you. And now you're caught in the paradox: be visible but not forward. Be graceful but not distant. Be wise, but never so wise you outshine the men meant to hold the torch. You smile. Any other advice? Hanife turns to you slowly. Remember your name. They will try to replace it. That night, you whisper your name to yourself 3 times before going to sleep. You hold it like a charm. The invitation finally came 3 days later. You wake to the sound of water being poured, not from a servant, but from a jug placed softly on your table. Steam curls from the lip of the basin. Beside it, a folded towel, a comb carved from horn, and the lilac robe, freshly pressed. No note, but that's how it's done. You bathe in silence. You dry your skin with practiced care, anoint your wrists with rose oil, trace your lips with the color of pressed berries. Your hair is braided into an elegant knot. You wear the robe, it fits. You wait by the door. A eunuch appears. No words. You follow. The corridor is empty. Lit by lanterns in odd numbers. You count them to calm yourself. 5. Then 3. Then 1. He leads you to a chamber you've never entered before. High ceilings, marble floors so polished it looks like water, cushions shaped like sleeping animals. There are 2 other women inside. One is older. One is younger. The older one smiles at you. It's not a kind smile. The younger one doesn't meet your gaze. You are seated. Not on the floor, on a cushion edged with silver thread. Someone hands you a tiny cup of something that smells like orange blossom and smoke. Then, nothing. You wait, for what feels like hours, but when the door finally opens, you don't hear it, you just feel it, the way air changes when someone powerful enters a room. The Sultan. He doesn't look at you. He speaks to the older woman. He laughs, once, then his eyes sweep the room. He sees you. He doesn't smile, but he says, "You've brought new music." The older woman gestures to you. You bow. "If it pleases your majesty." Your voice is steady. You don't know where the strength comes from. Maybe from the days of silence. Maybe from the hours you spent practicing things no one ever saw. You pick up the oud. You pluck a soft, low chord. You sing, not loud. Not bold. But like someone who has something small and real to offer. The lyrics are from your own poem. The one about rain. It came with no promise, no thunder, no plea. It asked nothing. It only fell, and still, I opened the door. When you finish, the room is quiet. The Sultan does not applaud, but he nods. And says, "Let her stay." That's it, no more. The other 2 women are dismissed. You remain. You stay the night, not in his arms, not in his bed, but in a chamber nearby. With guards at the door and incense burning, you are now noted, and that, in the harem, is everything. You dream of rain again, but this time, it doesn't fall on stone, it falls on lavender, and you don't open the door, you're already outside. You wake before the sun, the robe still smells faintly of incense and rosewood, and the cushion beneath you carries the weight of decision. Not yours. Someone else's. Someone higher, older, clothed in embroidered power. You've been seen now. Not just glanced at. Seen. You've become one of the names that travels softly between lips. One of the faces a eunuch might reference with a raised eyebrow. One of the girls who no longer waits in the corner when Valide walks past, but with attention comes its shadow, observation. They watch you more closely now. Not just the black eunuchs, but the women, too. You can feel their eyes when you pour tea, when you lift a fan, when you smile or choose not to. Hanife visits your room 2 nights later. She doesn't sit. Just stand by the carved door frame, arms folded, eyes tracing the pattern on your robe like it's some kind of code. "So," she says. "You've passed." You don't ask what test. Instead, you reply, "For now." She almost smiles. "Good. You're learning." She tosses something onto your bed. A bracelet, simple, silver, no jewels. Engraved with a flower you don't recognize. Don't wear it, she says. Just keep it. And then she's gone. You tuck it into the seam of your pillow. You don't ask what it means. Your days shift again. You're removed from most group lessons. You're invited to join the favorites reading circle, an unspoken term for the women who've caught the Sultan's eye in some way. Past or present. The meetings take place in a quiet chamber ringed with cushions and niches of books, mostly poetry, some stories, and a few forbidden things written in the old scripts. One woman reads a Persian love poem that has everyone sighing. Another recites a tale from India about a prince who falls in love with a demon disguised as a bird. Someone else hums the tune of a verse long since banned in court, and then it's your turn. You choose not to read. Instead, you ask a question: what is the difference between favor and affection? The room stills. One woman, older, with long hair the color of tarnished copper, replies, "Favor is given. Affection is risked." The youngest in the room, barely 16, says, "They're the same thing. Until you lose one." You say nothing, but your question lingers, circling the room like a bird looking for a ledge to land on. You begin noticing the subtle hierarchy within the favorites themselves. There are those who are truly adored, and those who are convenient. Some are there because of their father's rank. Others because they know when to laugh, and some, like you, are still being tested. They call you Nazli Hanım now. A title stitched in softness and power, but you don't feel powerful, not when the valide begins asking for reports on your demeanor. Not when your laundry disappears for an entire day and returns with a scent you didn't choose. Not when a gift of dates arrives with no note, and one of them is laced with something bitter. You don't eat them, you burn them, and you tell no one. Historians still argue over what became of the women who rose too quickly in the Ottoman harem. Some say they were married off to distant governors, turned into political gifts wrapped in brocade. Others believe they simply faded, out of favor, out of sight, into the endless courtyards and quiet deaths of obscurity. You understand now that survival here is not about rising. It's about hovering, just above danger, just below envy, to shine, but never too brightly, to be memorable, but not threatening, to be a whisper, not an echo. One morning, the Sultan sends for you again. No performance. No tea, just a walk. You're led to the garden with him and 2 guards behind. The roses are in bloom, white, soft, and slightly overripe. The scent is so thick it clings to your hair. He doesn't speak for the first stretch. Just walks with hands behind his back, eyes drifting toward nothing in particular. Finally. Not all of them. Just some. You don't always speak. You're not always seated beside him. Sometimes, you simply play the oud while he listens. Other times, you listen while he reads, letters, dispatches, even a piece of Sufi poetry he mutters under his breath like a prayer. You are not in love, but you are curious, and curiosity is more dangerous than affection. Affection forgives, curiosity notices. At the next reading circle, the young girl asks you, "What does he say when you're alone?" You answer honestly, "Sometimes nothing." She frowns, "Then why are you still there?" You smile, "Because silence is safer than a promise." She looks confused, but the older women in the room nod, slowly. Quietly, like trees acknowledging wind, you're sent a gift the next morning, a small box of perfume. Inside, a note in the Sultan's handwriting, for the verses you don't say aloud. You don't wear perfume, you keep it sealed, but at night, you open the box and breathe it in, just once, then you sleep, wrapped in silence, wrapped in meaning, wrapped in the scent of things almost said. The days that follow grow quieter, not because less happens, but because what happens is meant to be unspoken. Invitations arrive without names. Your presence is requested with the light tap of a servant's hand on your doorframe. A book is placed beside your breakfast tray with a flower tucked between the pages, not a rose, but a violet. Modest. Obscure. Chosen deliberately, you begin to master the art of implication. One glance too long can mean a conversation, one absence can say more than 10 letters. You learn that power is not in the robe you wear, or the title they whisper. It's in knowing when not to appear. When not to speak. When not to smile, and it is, oddly, lonely, not completely. Not the bone-deep isolation you feared as a new arrival. But the kind of loneliness that comes from being slightly apart. Slightly observed. Slightly restrained in every moment, even among those who once braided your hair or laughed with you at supper. You miss the simplicity of not mattering. One morning, while practicing your oud beside the east window, a bird lands on the sill. A blackbird, dusty and scraggly, with a limp wing and a stubborn posture. It doesn't sing. It just sits, eyes fixed on your fingers. You pause, it doesn't fly away, you start to play again, just a soft tune, something aimless. The bird closes its eyes, you don't know why, but it makes you ache. You name it Gaze, for night. It doesn't return the next day. You still glance at the sill every morning, just in case. That afternoon, you are summoned to a gathering, not formal, but select. Just 6 women, all of them either current favorites or former ones. The Valide is present, seated like a monument in pale blue silk. The discussion is not idle. They're reviewing a letter from the Queen of Hungary. They're discussing whether the court composer should be exiled. They're considering which daughter of the Sultan might be married next, and to whom. You are the youngest there. You are not asked to speak, but halfway through, Valide looks at you and says, "You wrote a poem about rain." It's not a question. You nod. Do you believe in omens? You don't hesitate. I believe they only work on people who are already afraid. She watches you for a long time. Then she nods, just once, and continues her discussion. You realize you've passed a test you didn't know was being given. Later, one of the older women squeezes your wrist and whispers, "You're clever. Just don't be cleverer than her." That night, you remember something your mother once said. Before you ever arrived here, before the harem, before the poems, she told you, be careful of being the smartest person in the room. They'll forgive you for beauty, not for wisdom. You hadn't understood, now you do, completely. You sleep lightly, the bracelet Hanif gave you remains tucked beneath your pillow. The perfume stays sealed in its box. The lilac robe now hangs where your old linen one once did. Everything in your room whispers of change, but none of it says what kind. You still dream, sometimes gardens, sometimes of fire, sometimes standing on the balcony, looking down at yourself below. And once, just once, you dream that Gaze returns, not with broken wings, but carrying a letter in its beak. You wake before you can read it. The dream doesn't fade, it lingers behind your eyes like incense in a closed room. You keep expecting to find a feather on your windowsill. Instead, you find a folded note, delivered with your midday fruit. No seal. Just your name in a hand you've seen before, the same hand that once wrote, "He dreams in red." This time it simply says, "Beware of the jasmine in winter. It grows too early." You tuck the note into your robe. You don't show anyone. You don't ask questions. But that night, you refuse the jasmine-scented oil your servant offers, and you tell her, calmly, smiling, that you'd prefer lavender from now on. She nods, but her hands tremble just slightly when she takes the oil away. You begin to notice things, a servant's change en route. A eunuch's second glance. The way the Valide now praises a different girl in public, softly, but often. That girl's name is Safi. She plays the harp. She writes in Persian. She doesn't blink when spoken to. You've never heard her laugh. You start to wonder if you're being replaced, or if someone simply wants it to look that way, and then you realize the truth. In the harem, it's not about being chosen once. It's about being remembered consistently. You are only ever one distraction away from being forgotten, so you do not sulk. You do not compete. You write poems, yes, but also letters. Practice ones. The kind used for diplomacy. You pen a response to a sultan in Morocco you'll never meet. You write a marriage proposal on behalf of a princess whose face you've never seen. You write riddles in invisible ink, using crushed lemon peels and tea leaves. You write because writing is permanent in a place where memory is fickle. Then one evening, the Sultan asks to hear your voice, not your playing, not your reading, just your voice. You tell a story from your childhood. A folk tale about a fox who pretends to be a prince. It's ridiculous. Unimpressive. He listens to every word. At the end, he asks, "Did the fox get away with it?" You say, "Of course." Everyone believed him. That's the problem with charm. He laughs, full, unexpected. That's the problem with truth, too. You don't reply, you don't need to. Sophie smiles at you in the baths the next day. It's the first time she has. She pours water over your shoulders, gently. You wait for her to say something else. She doesn't, but as she leaves, she whispers, "You won't last." You finish your rinse. You don't rush. You let the water fall in sheets down your back like you're immune to the curse she just tried to place. And maybe you are, or maybe it's already working. Historians still argue whether rivalries among the Sultan's favorites were orchestrated by the palace to maintain control, or whether jealousy simply flourished naturally in a garden of women all hoping to bloom under one sun. Some say Valide played favorites like chess pieces, sacrificing one to keep another in power. Others believe the women themselves held the true reins of intrigue, passing secrets like combs and slipping poison into figs with a smile. What you know is this: fear is currency, and right now, yours is worth a fortune. You see Hennife less, not because she's avoiding you, but because you've reached a place where association becomes dangerous. If she favors you too openly, it draws attention. If she distances too far, it invites speculation. So you nod when you pass her, she nods back. That's enough. The next night, a new robe arrives. Emerald green, with thread work in the shape of peacock feathers. It comes with no note. But this time, the servant says aloud, "For the banquet." You hadn't heard of a banquet, which means it's not for everyone, which means you've been chosen again, but for what? The room is candlelit. Low cushions, shallow trays of candied walnuts, fresh pomegranate, and rose petal sherbet. The Sultan is there. The Valide is not. There are 6 women. One of them is Sophie. Another is the girl who reads fortunes in rosewater. You are seated last. You eat little. You speak even less. The Sultan looks at you once, halfway through a poem recitation by the harpist. He doesn't smile, but his eyes rest longer than they need to. Sophie notices. She offers him a slice of melon. You watch her fingers brushes as she hands it over. He takes it without looking at her. He eats it, slowly. And just before dessert, he requests music. You are handed your oud. You don't hesitate. You play the song you wrote 2 months ago, the one no one's heard. A song without lyrics. Just longing. Just space. Just the echo of something barely remembered. When you finish, no one claps, they never do, but the Sultan rises, and so does everyone else. The evening ends without words. That night, a folded note appears beside your bed. It reads, "Some jasmine is winterborn, and some are planted by design." You sleep with it under your pillow, but you do not dream, not that night, only stillness, like the moment just before snow. You wake in the middle of the night, no sound. No movement, just that sharp, clear sensation of being awake in a place where everything wants you asleep. Your breath echoes too loud in your own ears. You sit up slowly, careful not to rustle the silk beneath you, and stare at the door. It's closed. Locked. But your skin prickles like someone is just on the other side. Waiting, not to enter, just to listen. You're used to whispers, but tonight, the silence feels watched. You reach beneath your pillow for the note, the second one. You read it again by moonlight. Some jasmine is winterborn, and some are planted by design. You don't know who's writing them, or why. But now you're certain it's not just about gossip or poetry or some romantic diversion. These messages are warnings. Or riddles. Or maybe they're attempts to turn you into a player in someone else's game. You don't want to be a player, but you already are. Each one more cryptic than the last, the window that opens too wide lets the cold in. Ask yourself who gives you mirrors. When two birds sing the same tune, one must fall silent. You start comparing handwriting, you start watching who touches your belongings, you wonder if you're being helped, or hurted, or both, then one day, Sophie is gone, no warning, no farewells, just an empty chamber. Whispers say she was married off to a pasha. Others say she's been moved to the old palace. A few mutter she became ill and died overnight. No one knows, but everyone notices, and that silence, the kind that follows after a girl disappears, wraps itself around you like a wet curtain. You wonder, was it the melon? The smile? The wrong note at the wrong time, or did she see something she wasn't supposed to? You don't say her name aloud, you don't need to, she's already a ghost. That evening, a new girl was brought in, young. Too young, eyes full of terror and glitter. You help her find her sleeping cushion. You show her how to fold her robe, how to adjust the sash so it won't drag in water. She asks, do they ever send us home? You smile softly, sometimes. In stories. She doesn't ask again, she just curls up under her thin blanket and shivers herself to sleep, and you sit nearby, watching the flicker of lanterns on the wall, wondering how long before she stops believing in return journeys. You wonder when you stopped, too. You sleep with the last note folded under your mattress, you stop replying to anyone in poetry, you don't eat jasmine rice, you don't play the oud, and still, the Sultan asks for you, not every night, but enough that they still call you Nazli Hanım, enough that the Valides guards know your name without needing a note, enough that the new girls watch you with a mix of fear and hope. And enough that you're still a threat, just enough, but never too much, never again. You wake to rain, not the stormy, theatrical kind, but the patient sort, gentle, persistent, threading between the tiles and vines, softening the very air. The harem feels smaller in the rain. Softer. More secretive. Like the walls themselves lean closer, listening, you wrap a shawl around your shoulders and sit by the window, not for the view, but for the sound. Rain on stone is the only truth here that doesn't lie. You hum to it. Not a song. Just a sound you used to make as a child when you were left alone with your thoughts. You thought you'd forgotten it. You hadn't. Somewhere behind you, a door opens. It's not your chamber door. It's not a servant. It's the small private passage meant only for messengers and high-ranking women. You turn, Hanife stands there, no smile, no fanfare, she simply says, walk with me. The corridor she leads you down smells of cedar and charcoal. Torches burn low. The air feels like it's holding its breath. This passage connects the east wing, she says. Most girls never see it. Most shouldn't. You don't ask why you're seeing it, you already know, you're not most. The corridor ends at a small octagonal room with a domed ceiling painted with stars. It's not a gold leaf. It's charcoal and bone white, like an astronomer's sketch. Hanife sits. You do too. She doesn't speak for a while, then, do you know how many girls I've seen rise? You shake your head, 37. She says. Do you know how many stayed? You don't answer, she leans forward. 3. And only one of them is alive now. You wait, because this is not a warning, it's a reckoning. You're smart, Hanife says. But smart girls burn faster than pretty ones. They try to navigate. To correct. To survive with logic. She taps her chest. This place doesn't work on logic. You say, then what does it work on? She leans back, folds her arms, on rhythm. On breath. On timing. It works on shadows and rumors. On who smiled when they shouldn't, and who didn't when they were supposed to. You nod, it's not new information, but hearing her say it out loud makes it real, so, you ask, what happens now? She pauses, I don't know. That's the most terrifying answer of all. The next few days pass in quiet unrest. You're given new robes, blue and cream, embroidered with vines. You're asked to attend fewer gatherings, but more private ones. Just you, the Sultan, and a scroll or two. He seems distracted lately. Worn. He talks less. He reads more. Once, he falls asleep while you're reading to him. You don't wake him, you just sit in silence, watching the rain paint small rivers across the tiled floor beyond the windows. You wonder what he dreams about, you wonder if you're in those dreams, you wonder whether that would be a blessing, or a trap. The Valide sends you a gift, a silver ring set with turquoise, nothing elaborate, no note, just the ring. You don't wear it. Not immediately, you have it tied to your sash, hidden between two folds, where no one can see it. Turquoise is for protection, but protection from whom? Historians still argue whether the inner workings of the imperial harem followed any consistent structure, or whether they were shaped entirely by the personalities of those inside. Some call it a calculated court, ruled by senior women and whispers. Others describe it as a spontaneous theater, where ambition bloomed like mold in damp corners, and no one held the script for long. You think both are true. There is a structure, and within it, chaos dances like smoke. The girl with the glittering eyes, new, barely 17, starts asking too many questions. Why does that guard always linger outside Hanif's door? Why are the bath attendants suddenly different? Why did one of the dancers disappear after the banquet? You tell her. Stop asking. She doesn't. One evening, she's found in the gardens, eyes glassy, pulse slow, lips stained dark from something she ate. The eunuchs say it was spoiled berries. You know better. You stay by her side until she sleeps, and when she wakes, hours later, coughing softly, you say only, now you know. She nods, and never asks again. You return to your writing, but now the poems are encrypted, verses that only make sense if read backward, lines that double as instructions for escape, stanzas that mean nothing, until you rearrange the first word of each. You don't write them to be found, you write them to remember who you are, in a place where everyone else seems to be forgetting you. One morning, the Sultan calls for music. You are led to the winter courtyard. No others are present. He sits beneath a white canopy. Snow falls. He looks tired. He says, "Do you still play the song with no words?" You nod, you play it, and when you finish, he says nothing, but he closes his eyes, and stays that way for a long time. When you're dismissed, a eunuch hands you a letter, sealed in green wax. You don't open it, not yet. You wait until you're alone, beneath your covers, a candle dimmed to a whisper. Inside, 3 words, you are enough. You read it twice, then burn it, not out of fear, but because memory is stronger than parchment, and tonight, you want to carry those words in your bones. That night, something changes in the way you walk, not in posture. Your back is as straight as ever. Your steps as light and measured. But inside, where tension once waited like a hand clenched too tight, there's not calm, exactly. Not relief, something quieter than both, resolve. The note lingers in your memory, tucked just behind your ribs like a hidden seam in silk. You are enough. You've been waiting for someone to say it since the day you arrived. Since before, really. Since the first time you realized survival depended on being more beautiful, more obedient, more careful, more clever. And for the first time, someone told you you didn't need to try so hard to exist, that you were already real. Already something. In the morning, it's snowing harder, the palace tiles are slick with ice, and the eunuchs move slower, their steps cautious. The other women complain of cold feet, dry skin, silence. They wrap themselves in brocade and wool and speak in whispers, as if the snow itself might overhear. You head to the bath chambers alone. It's empty, except for a single servant heating rosewater in a bronze bowl. She nods as you enter and leaves without a word. her footsteps muffled by the steam curling across the floor. You disrobe slowly, not for any ceremony, just to feel the weight lift from your shoulders, layer by layer. The steam kisses your skin. The silence cradles you. You immerse yourself, eyes closed, ears underwater. The world fades to heartbeat and breath. You think of your mother, her hands, her voice. The day she gave you a tiny wooden comb and said, "Don't ever let someone else decide when you're ready." She didn't cry when you were taken, you didn't either, but now, with the warm water surrounding you and the snow falling like ash beyond the windows, you finally let yourself ache. You don't sob, but tears rise anyway, quiet as steam. When you return to your room, something is waiting, a bowl of figs, not unusual, but resting beneath one is a card, ivory parchment, folded once. You unfold it with steady hands. 3 lines. The mirror cracks, the jasmine blooms, choose your silence. You sit down, slowly, and reread the lines again and again. This isn't poetry, it's instruction. But for what? Is the mirror you? Is silence safety? Or rebellion? You remember what Hennife said, rhythm, breath, timing. You've kept to the rhythm. You've breathed when they told you to. You've waited for cues. But now, perhaps, it's your turn to break that rhythm, to choose the next beat yourself. To choose the next beat yourself. Later that evening, a commotion erupts in the West Wing. Servants running. One girl fainted. A eunuch shouting for towels. Rumors spiral fast, someone collapsed in the prayer room. Poison. No, fever. No, blood, but you stay still, because your instinct tells you, this is the jasmine blooming, a distraction. A warning. A hand placed carefully on the chessboard, and you wait, you don't go see, you don't ask, you light a candle, and you write, not a poem, not a riddle, just a note, 5 words, when the fox outsmarts itself. You fold it neatly, you leave it under Henife's door, no signature, she'll know, she always does. The next morning arrives pale and breathless, the palace is quieter than usual. Not the hush of sleep or reverence, but that tense quiet you hear before a string snaps. Footsteps move quickly but softly. Curtains are drawn. Windows stay latched. Even the birds seem to hold their breath. You rise before your servant knocks. You dress plainly. You comb your own hair. You wait, no one comes, not yet. You decide to walk, not toward the music room, not toward the gardens, but down the lesser-known corridor where the calligraphy instructor used to keep his inkstones. It's dusty now. Abandoned. But still warm with memory. There's no note waiting for you this time, but someone has left a book. Not placed. Dropped, its pages are marked with ash. You lift it gently. It's a story you've read before, a fable about a harem girl who hid coded messages inside embroidery patterns. She stitched her way into myth, and then out of history. You open to the middle, a pressed flower falls out, jasmine, white, winterborn. You return to your room and find the Valite's eunuch waiting. He doesn't speak. Just bows, then gestures. You follow, not to the Valite's chambers, to the Sultan's. You're not dressed for it. No ceremonial robe. No song prepared. No tea tray in your hands. Just the soft scuff of your slippers against marble. Inside, it's not what you expect. No audience. No guards, just the Sultan, seated on the low couch, turban set aside, hands rubbing sleep from his face like a boy waking late from a nap he didn't mean to take. He looks older today, more human than ever. He says, I dreamt of a fox again. You say nothing. He looks up. She was clever. Beautiful. She ran through 1,000 corridors and never left a footprint. But in the dream, she stopped running. You still say nothing, because you know how dreams work here. They're not dreams. They're warnings dressed in metaphor. Or regrets wrapped in silk. She turned back, he says. And the garden swallowed her. No ceremony, just a door held open. You turn your head, once, not all the way, just enough to see the gate closing behind you, and then you step in, the door shuts, the wheels begin to turn, and Istanbul, soft with fog and layered with minarets, opens ahead like a riddle with no answer. You do not know what happens next, only that it's yours. Back in the harem, they will not speak your name for a while. Not because you are forgotten, but because silence, here, is the only way to preserve something precious, like a pressed flower in a sealed book. Somewhere in a drawer, the Valide keeps a folded note, 5 words. When the fox outsmarts itself, she reads it once a month. She never smiles, but she never throws it away. The road beyond the palace is uneven, the kind that nudges your thoughts loose as you travel. You sit in the carriage with your hands folded, not from fear, not from habit, just because they have nowhere else to go. The curtains are drawn. You don't peek through them. You know the city is still there, the domes, the bells, the boatmen calling on the Bosphorus. But for now, you need to forget Istanbul the way it remembered you. You hum softly. Not a tune. A rhythm, the same rhythm you once used to match your steps down the marble hallway, to time your silences, to count the seconds before answering the Valide's questions. Now, the rhythm is just yours. A heartbeat you no longer have to mute. The carriage slows after what feels like an hour. You don't know where you are. Not exactly. But the air smells like the sea. Salt, smoke, and the faint tang of citrus. You remember that scent from a garden once, a courtyard where the harem women were allowed 1 hour of sun a day. You'd spent that hour with your hands in the dirt, not speaking, pretending to be part of the earth. The eunuch opens the carriage door. He doesn't look at you. Your ship, he says. There's a skiff waiting by the dock, not a grand galleon. Nothing with silk sails or polished decks. Just a working vessel, low, creaking, honest. You nod. No bags. No retinue. No papers in your name, but you step aboard. The sea is flat as silk, and as you move away from shore, you finally turn your head, just once. The palace is barely visible now, a blur of stone and stories. You say nothing, but the wind seems to understand. You land somewhere south, not a province you know well, just a town with red roofs, a market that smells of onions and honey, and a name you don't say aloud because it hasn't decided what it means to you yet. A house has been prepared. Quiet, whitewashed, with a fig tree in the yard and walls thick enough to forget the sound of gold coins clinking in pockets. Inside, there's only one servant. An old woman with no eyebrows and a laugh like crumpled paper. She says her name is Rayhan. She does not bow. She hands you a bowl of soup and says, "Eat while it's hot." You do. It tastes like home, though you've never had a home before. Not really. Days pass. No one comes. No one asks. No one writes. You sleep through the mornings. You wake to the sound of goats or wind or the slow hiss of olives being pressed. You walk, not in slippers, not on marble, but in dust, barefoot, following the path behind the fig tree that leads to nowhere in particular, and for the first time in what feels like years, your steps make noise. You do not silence them. You let the world hear you. Then, one day, a letter arrives. It's not sealed, not written in court ink, just folded parchment tucked between 2 loaves of bread the merchant delivers once a week. 3 words, still watching stars. You know the hand, Hanif. You smile. You do not write back. But that night, you lie on the rooftop and trace the constellations like stitching, and for the first time in a long time, you whisper a poem into the dark and don't worry about who hears it, or what they'll do. You wake up to sunlight, not filtered through latticework or softened by silk drapes, but bold, direct, and a little too honest. The window in your new room faces east. No minarets on the skyline now, just hills and laundry lines, olive trees, and the occasional blur of chickens darting across courtyards. You take your tea outside, not because it's protocol, but because the fig tree has begun to bloom again. The bees hum like distant instruments. And you, formerly Nazli Hanem of the imperial harem, sit on a wooden stool, barefoot, elbows on your knees, watching ants dismantle a piece of quince. You are, by most courtly standards, no one now, and it feels like becoming everything. Rayhan begins teaching you the names of local herbs. Not their courtly names, the poetic ones whispered between concubines as metaphors for skin or secrets, but their useful ones. This one breaks the fever. This one opens lungs. That one. She smacks your hand away. That one will kill your neighbor's goat and everyone will blame you. You learn quickly, the names stick. Because no one's forcing them into your head, you find yourself humming again. Not the harem lullabies. Something older. Something from before. You didn't know you remembered your childhood songs until they start slipping out while you grind leaves or knead dough. Rayhan listens once and says, "Your mother was clever." You blink, you've never mentioned her, she just shrugs. You sing like someone raised by a woman who knew stories. You smile, a little, just enough. One morning, a child appears outside the courtyard wall, thin, dusty, barefoot. Probably 7, he doesn't speak. Just watch, you leave half an orange on the wall. He takes it and runs. Next day, he's back. This time, he brings you a rock shaped like a pear. You're not sure what you're trading anymore, but you continue the exchange, fruit for stones. Bread for feathers. A smooth button in return for a poem carved onto driftwood in what you suspect is not his handwriting. It makes no sense, so it makes perfect sense. Historians still argue over what became of the concubines who were granted informal release. Some records list them as gifted to loyal viziers. Some vanish from census rolls entirely. A few are noted, simply, as gone to prayer, which could mean monastery, exile, or death, depending on who was writing the ledger, but oral histories whisper of women who became teachers, healers, poets, even spies. You don't know which one you'll become, and for once, you're in no hurry to decide. You begin writing again, not court poetry. Not riddles, just observations, the patterns of clouds, the sound of oil cracking on iron, the way people walk when they think no one is watching. You keep a small book tucked under your mattress. You tell no one, not because it's forbidden, but because it's yours, entirely yours. You see Hanife once more, unexpectedly. You've gone to market alone for the first time. Your hands are full, cabbage, pomegranates, something you're pretty sure is dried squid, and there she is, at the bread stall, hair covered, but unmistakable. She looks at you. Doesn't smile. Doesn't wave, but her eyes soften. She mouths, "Good." You nod. She leaves without buying anything. You don't follow. You don't need to. The confirmation is enough. You are alive. You are safe, and someone remembers. One night, a merchant passes through the village. He's old, round, and tells stories to the children using a carved puppet in one hand and a block of halva in the other. You listen from the doorway. He tells a story of a clever fox who lived in a palace so vast, it had gardens inside gardens. She could write backwards. She never stepped in the same shadow twice. He ends with, "No one knows where she went." Some say she lives on a mountaintop. Others say she melted into mist. A little girl asks, "Did the fox have a name?" The merchant grins, "Of course not. That's why she's free." You don't laugh, but you do sleep very well that night. Later, you teach Rayhan's niece how to read. She's shy, but when she finishes her first sentence, stumbling through the syllables, you feel something in your chest expand. Not like pride. Not exactly, more like recovery, like a note finally played that had been caught in your throat for years. She asks you what the word liberate means. You tell her, it's when something stops belonging to someone else. She frowns. Like a chicken running away. You grin, exactly. You don't write your old name anywhere, you don't speak it aloud, but sometimes, late at night. You trace the outline of a letter or two on the inside of your arm with your finger, not to mourn, just to remember, the way you might remember a dream you woke up from a long time ago, knowing it was. You begin to notice the seasons differently now, not by the arrival of court rituals or the flavor of imported fruits, but by the small, quiet changes that whisper through your bones. The bees vanished earlier this year. The fig tree's leaves drop in one night, like a shrug. The neighbor's rooster starts crowing an hour later than he used to, as if mourning the lost light. There are no proclamations. No parades. No eunuchs counting days with beaded cords, just wind. Just water. Just time, unfolding without permission. You take to writing down what you see. Not because it needs to be recorded, but because it feels good to keep track of what the world does when no one's watching. What you do when no one's watching, you realize you become quieter, but not more afraid. You move through your house the way you once moved through palace halls, listening to walls, reading the mood in footsteps. But here, nothing waits to pounce. Here, the only surprise is how long you can sit without needing to speak. The boy with the feathers brings you a broken watch, you're not sure where he found it. The last you heard, she disappeared. Now, maybe, she didn't. Maybe she's watching. Or maybe someone else remembers her. You hang the ribbon on a nail above your window, where it dances in the breeze. You say nothing, but your chest tightens. Sapphi's ghost was never angry. She just wanted to be seen. Historians rarely write about what happens after power is released. Their books prefer ascensions, not aftermaths. They chart scandals, not silences. But you have learned the truth. History keeps going even when you are no longer its headline. It seeps into corners. It lives in fig leaves and paper birds and girls learning to spell freedom. You are not a name in a record. You are a whisper in the foundation, a handprint beneath the final layer of paint, a poem no longer recited aloud, but still memorized, still felt. You don't know what the Sultan is doing now, you don't wonder often, but once, while picking herbs, you find a coin in the dirt. A new one. His face is stamped on it, younger than you remember. You brush the dirt off, look at it for a while, then toss it back into the soil, let it stay there, metal pretending to be immortal. You are not made of silver, you are not meant to shine forever, you are meant to grow, and one day, a visitor arrives, not Hennife, not anyone you know. Just a tall girl with fire in her step and a smirk like she's tasted every lie the world could offer and still wants more. She says, "They said you used to be someone." You smile, "I still am." The girl tilts her head. "They said you knew how to open locked doors." You nod, "I do." She sits down across from you, "Will you teach me?" You pour tea, place the old broken watch between you, and say, "Let's begin." The fire crackles low beside you as the girl watches with a hunger in her eyes, not the kind for food, but for answers. She taps her fingers against the clay cup you handed her, glancing at the door like someone who's not used to staying still. You see yourself in her. Or, not quite. You see versions of yourself, stitched together from fear, wit, suspicion, longing. The difference is, you now know which parts you've outgrown. She doesn't. Not yet, she says, "I don't want to wait for someone to pick me." You nod, "That's good." She frowns, "Most people tell me I'm impatient." You shrug, "They told me that too. Just before they handed me a crown I couldn't wear." Her brow furrowed, "You don't explain." She's not ready for all of it. But you place an old scroll on the table between you, its edges frayed, a map on the inside so stylized, so coded, that only someone raised in silence could read it. First, you say, you learn to see without showing that you're looking. You don't advertise yourself as a teacher. But word spreads the way rain seeps into earth, slow at first, then suddenly everywhere. By the end of the month, you're teaching 6 girls. By winter, 10. They bring bread, milk, copper buttons, gossip. They call you Hoka Hanem, a title that tastes strange on your tongue but not unwelcome. You teach them more than letters. You teach them how to walk quietly, how to see the tilt of a man's expression and know what it hides, how to step forward when everyone else is backing away, and how to make it seem like an accident. You keep one rule: they must always decide what to keep and what to shed. Never let the world do it for them. One evening, after the girls have gone, Rayhan comes to your door with a folded bit of cloth. not a message, a garment. A tiny child's robe, soft with age, she says nothing. Just places it on your table, you understand, she never had children. But someone did. Someone she watched. Protected. Maybe lost, you ask no questions. But that night, while mending the hem by candlelight, you whisper an old lullaby into the stitches, not because it will reach the child, but because the act itself still matters. The girl with the fire step comes back with bruised knuckles and a black eye. You raise an eyebrow. She says, "I didn't like what he said." You nod once, then teach her how to fight without fists. She resists at first, wants to do something, prove something. But by week's end, she understands. Subtlety is a weapon sharper than teeth. She begins practicing her silences. You teach her to lace them with poison. There's a rumor in town that you're a witch. You don't deny it. You don't confirm it either. You let the villagers wonder. It keeps them respectful, and it keeps the truly dangerous ones cautious. Historians still argue whether women like you, former concubines, now forgotten, unregistered, teaching in villages, constituted an informal underground. A secret network of exiled queens and dismissed favorites who built invisible empires beneath the bones of real ones. There is no proof, of course, just coincidences, like why every major rebellion in the next century included at least one literate girl with a palace accent and a habit of speaking softly at first. A boy shows up one day with a scroll. You don't take visitors from the capital. But his eyes are too calm for a child. And the seal, broken already, is one you recognize, green wax. No crest. Just a line drawn through it with the end of a reed stylus, Hanife's way of saying, read and destroy. The scroll says, 3 women disappeared, 2 new concubines are being groomed, the fox is missed, but the garden has new snakes. You burn the message, not because you're afraid, but because you don't want the girls to see it. They still think the fire step girl is the only one with bruises. You know better. You begin dreaming of water again. Not baths or fountains, not marble pools or moonlit tubs, just open water, unfenced, unmeasured. You think you might be ready to travel, not to return, but to expand, to carry the quiet forward, to teach girls who've never even heard of you, who don't need to, but who might need the kind of silence you've learned to sing. One morning, you give the fire step girl your old sash. She doesn't know what it means yet. She just runs her fingers over the embroidery, the tulips hidden in the lining. The stars no one can see unless they know where to look. She asks, "Why me?" You say, "Because you're not waiting to be chosen." She smiles, and, for the first time, bows, not out of duty, but as if lowering herself before something sacred, not you, but the space she now carries inside her. You don't correct her, she's already learning. The next morning, you watch her from the edge of the courtyard. The sash is tied clumsily, too tight on one side, the tassels mismatched, but it's hers now. She wears it like armor, unaware that its real power isn't in the stitching, but in the remembering. She joins the others beneath the fig tree. Not as a student this time, she leads the warm-up drills. Hand signs. Code phrases. The quiet game where everyone has to listen and report one detail they think no one else noticed. She gets 3 right. Better than you did on your 3rd try, all those years ago. You don't tell her that. She's not ready to hear how similar you really are. You just watch. A little in awe, not of her, but of what came after you. In the afternoon, you walk down to the river, the same one that bends around the edge of the village like a lazy bracelet. You sit on the rocks where the current flattens out. The children have stopped staring at you when you pass. Some wave. A few even shout teacher and dart away like it's a game. You let them believe it is. You pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders. The sun is warm, but your bones still remember marble floors and drafty towers. The way your body flinches slightly when someone walks behind you. That never really leaves, but it fades, slowly. You practice letting people walk behind you now. You count your breath instead of your fears. Someone leaves a basket of grapes on your doorstep. a scrap of paper tucked beneath it reads, "The jasmine bloomed again." No signature. You smile. Penknife is still watching. Still playing her own game. You don't know whether she's in favor, exile, power, or hiding. She doesn't say. That's the point. That's the pact. To live not in the story's spotlight, but just outside it, where things grow quietly. You teach the girls how to write their names backward, then forward again. How to fold a letter into a pattern so complex no one would think to unfold it. You give them puzzles. You ask them questions with no answers. Who is in charge of silence? What do you do when the roof leaks but no one sees it? If a girl knows a secret and forgets she knows it, does the secret disappear? They groan, they squirm, but they always come back the next day. They always want more. One of them, small, sharp, too smart for her age, starts leaving you riddles instead of homework. One morning, she hands you a note that simply says, "If you had stayed, who would you have become?" You don't answer immediately. You walk for 2 hours that day, along the ridge of the hill, past the orchard that smells like sugar and wood smoke. You pick up stones. You hum. You count your steps, and when you return, you write back, "Exactly who I am now. Just lonelier." She doesn't ask again, but she holds your hand longer the next time she leaves. Historians often write about the rise and fall of powerful women in palaces, their influence, their intrigue, their dramatic exits. But they rarely write about what comes after. The soft, slow defiance of not disappearing, the way a woman can stop being a symbol and start being real, messy, kind, a little tired. Entirely unbothered by ceremony. You've never been freer than in the moments when you forget you were ever once. Kept. You have bad days, you get older, your hands shake a little when you light the fire, you forget the names of certain flowers, but you remember the shape of freedom, you keep it warm in your chest, like a coal. One night, a storm rolls in, fast, heavy, summer thick. You sit by the window and watch the trees bend like dancers at the edge of losing balance. Thunder cracks. The roof creaks. A shutter bangs against the wall, and you go to fasten it, and in the flash of lightning, you see someone standing at the edge of your garden. Just for a second, you don't panic. You light a second lamp, not to illuminate them, but to let them know, "I see you." If they need shelter, the door is unlocked. If they need nothing, they can keep standing there, safe in the dark. You return to your chair. The storm rages, but inside, it's still. You're still, and in your stillness, someone else will find the courage to move. By morning, the storm had passed. The fig tree lost a branch, but the trunk holds firm. The girls arrive with wind-blown hair and muddy hems, laughing louder than usual. They tell you the lightning struck the village well, that a goat gave birth in the rain, and that 2 of them swear they saw a spirit walking near your house. You raise an eyebrow. The fire-step girl says, "It looked tall and quiet." You sip your tea. That could have been anyone. But you know who it was. You saw the shape. The stillness. The way it didn't ask anything of you, only watched. Someone you helped once. Someone you made space for. Maybe even someone who once held your hand when the walls were tighter. When the air was full of court perfume and danger, you don't go looking for them. You've learned, not every connection needs to be named to be honored. Some ties remain invisible but taut, like silk thread in the hem of a forgotten robe. Later that week, the oldest of your girls brings a question to your doorstep, not with her voice, with her eyes. She waits until the others leave, then holds up a note someone slipped into her satchel. The handwriting is delicate, slanted, dangerous. It says, "They're watching." But not for the reasons you think. You feel your chest tighten, not with fear, but with the kind of alertness you thought you'd left behind. You recognize the script. A former scribe from the palace, someone who was never meant to survive, but did. You burn the note in front of her. She watches without flinching. Do you know what it means? She asks. You reply, "It means you're doing something right." You start sleeping less, not out of worry, Out of readiness, there's a difference. You take longer walks. You sharpen the kitchen knives. You teach the girls how to speak across a room without using words, how to glance at a bowl, a curtain, a folded towel, and make it mean, not safe, wait, yes, run. You're not building an army, you're preparing a vocabulary for survival. In the middle of the month, a caravan passes through the village. Performers. Storytellers. Musicians with tambourines and a wind instrument that makes your stomach ache from memory. You go to the performance with Rayhan. You sit near the back. One of the dancers catches your eye, a girl with a jagged scar just below her ear, mostly hidden by her veil. You recognize her, but she doesn't recognize you. That's how far you've come. Historians tend to describe harems as closed worlds, sealed gardens of perfume and betrayal. But that's only part of the truth. The deeper truth is that harem women are, some of the best readers of the world outside their walls. Because you have to be. When your survival depends on what isn't said, when your worth is measured by how well you can perform a version of peace, when silence is your first language, but resistance becomes your second, you never really stop reading, you just change the story. The fire step girl asks to leave, not because she's tired, because she's ready. She comes to you in the evening, wrapped in the same sash you once gave her, now restitched with new patterns. She added a snake to it, coiled around a rose. You try not to smile, you don't ask where she's going, she doesn't tell you, but she leaves behind a sealed envelope with no name on it. Inside is a poem. Some gardens bloom, only after the foxes flee. Some mirrors crack, just to show you, better reflection. You add it to your book, press it between 2 pages, and whisper her name into the dark, once, just once, like a prayer. The girls keep coming, new ones now, quieter. From farther away, one of them stumbles over her own name when she tries to say it. You don't ask again, you let her write it down, slowly, letter by letter. She chooses to change one of the letters. You nod, that's how it begins. Again, one night, you wake from a dream of the palace. But it's not a nightmare, it's just a room, empty, the windows open, curtains swaying like they've been waiting for a wind that never came. You sit up, listen, the wind here smells like pine and smoke and salt, the sound of your breath is steady, you don't cry, you just feel something pass through you, like a thread being pulled out from an old seam, like an ending you didn't know had waited this long to arrive. You lie back down, you whisper, let it go. And sleep comes easy, so easy. The next morning, you wake with a kind of calm that doesn't come often, like the moment after a long-held note is finally allowed to fade. You sit by the window, sipping tea that's slightly too hot, and watch the sun climb slowly over the hills. The village below is already waking. Someone is calling a donkey. A pot clangs in the distance. A rooster who never keeps time announces the day late. As usual, you don't reach for your journal, you don't rehearse a lesson, you simply sit and breathe, and for the first time in weeks, you realize you don't feel watched, not because the world has stopped watching, but because you no longer need to perform in its gaze. You are not guarding your joy, you're living it. Later that day, you take the long path to the market. The air is soft and sticky with dust. A man is selling grilled flatbreads by the road. And you buy one just to have something warm in your hand. You smile at people. Not the polite half-smile of courtly grace. A full one, with the corners of your eyes creasing like they used to before all the protocol, and when someone says, "You're the teacher, aren't you?" You don't shrink, you say, "I am." Because what once felt like a disguise now feels like truth. You are a teacher, a builder of quiet revolutions, a stitcher of futures into the hems of girls' sleeves, a gardener who plants women, not flowers. This story is yours. The girls have started telling their own stories now, not to you, not just in hushed tones under trees, but aloud, to each other. Around fires. In courtyards. During breaks from grinding wheat or fetching water. They're not waiting to be asked anymore. They've stopped seeking permission. You watch it happen like the slow blooming of a stubborn flower. One of them, barely 12, spins a tale about a girl who disguised herself as a tradesman's son and snuck into the palace library to learn geometry from the vizier's scrolls. The others giggle. But they listen. They listen in the way you once did, when stories were the only things that felt real. Afterward, the girl catches your eye and winks, just once. You laugh, openly, this time, not because the story is true, but because it could be, and that possibility, that stretch of the imagination, is more precious than any crown. You begin noticing something else. The older women in the village have stopped looking at you with curiosity. Now, they nod, not just in greeting, but in recognition. Some begin sending their daughters to you. Some sit nearby as you teach, hands busy with weaving or stringing dried fruit, pretending not to eavesdrop. One even asks if you can read a letter her son sent from Edirne. You do. Then you teach her how to read the next one herself. She cries halfway through, says it's the first time she's heard her boy's voice in 3 years. You place her hand on the page. You'll never forget the sound now. A merchant passes through with a bundle of silk scraps and tales from the capital. He doesn't recognize you. He tells the villagers that the Valide has grown ill, that the Sultan's new favorite is from the provinces, and already whispers like a ghost through the corridors. You don't react. You just sort through the silk and choose the piece with a faded tulip pattern. That night, you wrap it around a clay pot and place it by your window, not as mourning, as a mark, a quiet flag. You're still here, you're still watching, even if they aren't. Historians rarely record quiet rebellions. They prefer the ones with banners, with fire, with blood, but you've come to believe the most dangerous revolutions begin in kitchens, gardens, half-lit rooms. Where a woman learns to read. Where a girl writes her first lie on purpose. Where secrets aren't whispered, they're planted, like seeds in unassuming soil. You've seen it now, not once, over and over, and it changes everything. A letter arrives without ink, just pressure marks on thick paper, readable only by touch if you know the code. You unfold it beneath a candle. It reads, "We still have keys, we still remember." That's all, but it's enough. Later that week, you find the fire-step girl's sash tied to the branch of your fig tree. No note, no messenger, just the sash, clean, weather-softened, and cut in half. You smile. She's passed it on, not an ending, a continuation. That's the real power. When what you began no longer needs your name attached to it. It lives, regardless. It spreads. You prepare a new sash, a different pattern, stars again. But this time, the thread forms a constellation only you remember, one visible only from the old harem windows, in the sliver of sky allowed to you on clear nights. You embroider in silence, each stitch a memory, each pause is a blessing. When it's done, you fold it into a box. You don't know who it's for yet, but you will, when they arrive, when they sit with that look in their eyes, the one that says, "I don't want to be chosen. I want to choose," and you'll hand it to them, no ceremony, no speech, just the weight of survival turned into fabric, and a whisper, "It's yours now." That night, you dream of the palace again, but this time, it's underwater. The walls are covered in seaweed, pearls hang from broken mosaics. The Sultan walks barefoot through the flooded halls, holding a lantern full of fireflies. He doesn't see you. You don't need him to. You swim past. Up, toward the surface, and you wake with salt on your lips and sunlight on your fingers. You sit up, breathe, then begin the day. You start keeping things you once would have hidden, little mementos tucked into corners, stones from the girls, dried herbs from Rayhan bundled with red thread, a scrap of green ribbon that showed up in your bread basket one morning with no explanation. Once, you would have burned them, buried them, pretended they meant nothing. Now, you arrange them along your windowsill like sacred artifacts. Your own secret museum of what it means to be here, now, free. Every object tells you something you didn't realize you needed to hear. That girl with the stone. She's learning to speak in riddles. The herbs. Rayhan trusts you with things even her bones remember. The green ribbon, that's her knife. Always was. You press your hand to it like a prayer, not to her, to what she risked, to what you became because of her. The fig tree starts blooming again, this time early, weeks before the others in the village. The neighbors comment on it like it's luck. You know better. That tree has been watching you. Growing as you grow. Dropping fruit only when it knows you're strong enough to reach for it. You sit under it with a cup of tea and a fresh sash folded in your lap. It's time again. You don't even know her name yet. The girl who will take it. You've seen her, though. Always at the edge of the group. Eyes sharp, mouth quiet, hands too still for a child her age. She reminds you of the first time someone handed you something beautiful and heavy and said, "This is not a gift. It's a responsibility." You didn't understand then, but you do now, so when the girl lingers after the others leave, pretending to tie her sandal, you call her over, no ceremony, you hand her the sash, and simply say, "You'll know when." She doesn't ask what you mean, she just nods, and tucks it away, like it's always been hers. That night, you light a single candle and sit cross-legged on the floor. You don't read, you don't sew, you just breathe, because sometimes, it's enough to know, to feel history not as a thing that happened to you, but as something you folded, reshaped, and passed along like fabric, like fire. Sometimes the quietest life is the one that echoes loudest through time. You sit with that, the softness, the truth, the ripple you've become, and you close your eyes, not to sleep, just to listen. The seasons shift again, and this time, you don't mark the change by the weather but by the weight of footsteps approaching your door. One morning, you hear them, deliberate, not hurried, heavy in a way that doesn't match any of your girls. You glance through the window. A man, cloaked in dust and silence, stands just beyond the fig tree. He doesn't knock. He doesn't need to. His presence knocks louder than hands could. You open the door slowly. He bows, not deeply. Not ceremonially. Just enough to say, "I know who you were." You offer tea. He declines. Instead, he hands you a sealed envelope. It's thicker than most, tied in green twine. Inside, a folded message, a pressed flower. And a key, small, bronze, worn smooth. The letter isn't signed, but the handwriting is unmistakable. There are rooms still locked in the capital. You are not forgotten. You are not finished. You run your fingers over the key, its shape unfamiliar but its meaning clear, an invitation, or a warning, or both. You don't answer right away. You close the door, sit, and place the key on the table beside the last cup of tea you made for yourself. Let it wait, let you decide, because that, too, is power. That evening, Rayhan catches you staring into space. She doesn't ask why, she never does. But she sets an extra bowl of lentil stew on the table and says, "Sometimes doors open only because they know you won't walk through them." You smile. She's always been better at reading the unspoken than the written. She has no need for keys. She's already unlocked everything that mattered. Your girls continue growing. One leaves to work with a traveling merchant who knows how to ferry letters in and out of the capital unnoticed. Another begins carving symbols into wood. Small tokens, she says, will help women remember who they are when no one else will. The third, your quietest, shyest, stitches a single word into the collar of every piece of clothing she owns. Mine. You don't take credit. You don't need to. You're no longer their origin. You're their echo. Historians will never find your name. Not in court records. Not in marriage ledgers. Not in the margins of treaties or the binding of holy texts, but they might notice patterns, little coincidences, an unusually literate generation of girls from the western provinces, a cluster of coded lullabies, an uptick in poetry passed hand to hand, unsigned but deeply personal. They'll frown at the records and wonder what slipped through. They'll say, "Someone must have taught them." And they'll be right. But they'll never trace the line back to the woman who once poured tea in a palace and learned to survive by listening. They won't know the weight of your sash, the sharpness of your gaze, the peace in your silence. That's fine. You didn't do it to be remembered. You did it so they would be. That night, you take the key and bury it beneath the fig tree. You whisper no name. You give no speech. Just cover it with soil, pat it down with your palm, and walk away. Because some legacies don't need to be reopened. Some doors stay closed not out of fear, but as an act of grace. one final time, a girl comes to you, new, timid, holding a name she no longer wants and a past that doesn't quite fit. She doesn't speak much, but you recognize the silence. It matches your own. You offer her a sash. This one is embroidered with waves, because sometimes we rise, sometimes we crash, and sometimes, we just carry the rhythm forward, one whisper at a time. She takes it, bows, and asks, "What do I do first?" You smile, and say, "Listen." You wake up before dawn the next day, not from habit, not from noise, but from a kind of softness inside you. Like something has settled overnight, quietly, without asking. The room is still dark. The sky outside is a heavy charcoal gray, not yet light, not fully night. For a moment, you simply lie there, watching the outline of the fig leaves press against the windowpane. They shift with the wind, brushing the glass gently. Like they're checking you're still here. You are, and you're not in a hurry. The day can wait. So much of your life was lived in anticipation, in readiness. For the footsteps in the hall, for the call of your name, for the hour when you'd be summoned or dismissed or displayed. Even in exile, even here, it took time to quiet that readiness, but this morning, your body isn't tense. It doesn't prepare for anything. It simply breathes, and for the first time in years, maybe decades, you feel entirely unclaimed. The tea boils slowly, you let it, you don't rush to pour it before it steams too long. You let it steep until the water turns the color of shadowed honey. And you drink it in silence, facing the window. The village is asleep, even the roosters, normally overeager, haven't found their voice yet. This hour belongs to no one. Not the Sultan. Not the servants. Not the girls. Not even the past, just you. You think about the key you buried. Not with regret, not with second guessing. It was never really about opening the door again. It was about acknowledging it existed. About saying, yes, I could go back, but you chose not to. That is the kind of power that no harem ever taught you, but that life outside its walls forced you to learn. The power of saying no without explanation. Of ending a story before it circles back on itself, by midday. You've walked to the edge of the hills again. There's a tree up there you like, nothing impressive, just crooked and stubborn, half dead in the winter, too green in the spring. You sit beneath it and write in the margins of your journal, not memories this time, plans, little ones, a list of herbs to replant, a riddle to give the girls next week, a thought about teaching them to map the stars, not the ones in textbooks, but the constellations of their lives, the people, the places, the moments they carry with them. Even when no one else sees, you sketch your own constellation. Not with ink, just with your finger in the dirt. A palace window. A fig tree. A sash. A name whispered at night. A girl who said no. A week passes, then another. Time, once measured in bells and schedules, now unfolds like soft fabric. It drapes around your days, unhurried, undemanding. The girls laugh louder. Their stories grow wilder. You pretend to scold them for their exaggerations but secretly delight in every ridiculous detail. One tells a tale about a concubine who turned into a cat and escaped the palace by hiding in a spice crate. Another insists there's a secret tunnel beneath the well that leads straight to the Sultan's bedchamber. You shake your head. Not unless he moved into the kitchens. You say, they love that one. You start passing on your old skills in new ways. You teach the girls how to sit still until the air itself starts talking. How to notice when someone enters a room without making a sound. How to use absence as a kind of presence. How to not be seen until it matters. But you also teach them how to choose joy, how to cook something sweet just because it's Wednesday, how to walk barefoot through the cold grass and not apologize for the softness in their step, how to say I changed my mind, and mean it, because surviving is only half of living. The rest is the part you're just beginning to learn. One night, you sit with Rayhan and the stars. She brings a flask of something strong, made from old fruit and spices, and the two of you sip slowly, saying little. She doesn't ask about the palace anymore. You don't ask about her past, instead, you talk about what kind of tree you'd be, if you could choose, she says, an olive tree. Gnarled. Bitter. Useful. You say, a figure. Soft, but stubborn. You both laugh, the kind of laughter that has nothing to prove. You sit there a long while after the flask is empty, not speaking, not needing to. In the morning, you find a single line etched into the wall of your house, tiny, subtle. Almost invisible, some legacies are stitched in silence. You don't know who left it, you don't need to, you run your hand over the carving, then leave it there, no frame, no decoration, just that single truth, quiet, firm, and waiting. You're a name in a poem now, inked in calligraphy, your real story sealed behind golden doors. The palace remembers you, but only in whispers. Not in the records kept by scribes, those dusty lists of births and appointments and carefully tracked deaths. No, you live in the places between the lines. In the brushstrokes of a court artist who once painted a faceless figure in the corner of a miniature scene, a girl in a garden, looking away. In the half-line of a lullaby that doesn't rhyme until you remember your name, they say you were beautiful, they say you were clever, they say you disappeared, and in the way stories bloom when no one's tending them, you become something more than true. There's a poem circulating in the capital now. Passed hand to hand, tucked into sleeves and stitched into embroidery. It starts with a fig tree. Then a voice. Then a girl who outwitted the entire empire. No one says your name, not exactly. But those who need to understand, do. A concubine with a mouth full of stars, a teacher who stitched thunder into her hem, a woman who taught silence how to sing. That last line gets stuck in your head sometimes, even out here where the stars are bright and the ground is yours. You hum it when you bake bread. When you grind herbs. When you hand a sash to the next girl in line and tell her to listen to the wind, you don't correct them, because yes. The truth was Messier. There were tears and fear and nights when you hated yourself for surviving, there were days you bowed not out of choice but out of exhaustion, but there were also moments, small, ordinary, unforgettable, when you said no to a power that didn't deserve you, and that's what echoes now. You catch glimpses of your legend sometimes, in a traveler's song sung by a boy with no idea what it means. In a scarf patterned with tulips, wrapped around the neck of a merchant who swears it brings luck. In a line of poetry carved discreetly into the base of a public fountain in a city you haven't seen in 30 years, you smile when you hear it, not with pride, with wonder, because no one can trace the story back to you. You've disappeared so well that your truth grew wings. Historians still argue whether the figure in the mural is real, whether the concubine who escaped the palace and taught forbidden knowledge ever actually existed, or whether she was a convenient symbol invented to inspire girls. They cite a lack of consistent sources, they question the plausibility of her survival, they wonder about the origin of the sashes, now traditional gifts among certain communities. Handed from woman to woman at moments of quiet rebellion, they try to find you, they never will, because you don't live in records, you live in choices, in hands held out, in soft refusals, in the pause before someone powerful realizes they've underestimated the quietest person in the room. You're a myth now, but not the kind with dragons or curses, the kind made of breath and thread and footsteps that never echo. A girl who lived, and didn't vanish, and didn't apologize for living. You teach one last lesson before you go, to the youngest girl. The one who never liked to speak unless it mattered. You take her hand and walk her to the tree, you show her the hollow space between two roots. There's a box inside, wooden, smooth, light, you hand it to her, inside, a sash, a ring you once wore, and a folded slip of paper that says, simply, when you're ready. She hasn't opened it yet, she just looks at you, and you see it, she understands. Then one morning, with no goodbyes, no explanation, no fanfare, you leave, not because you're done, because they're ready, because now they are the story. You step into the mist beyond the hills, and vanish like the final line of a poem no one dares recite aloud. They say you vanished into the hills, some swear you joined a caravan, slipped into a painted wagon, and now wander the empire disguised as a spice seller. Others say you were taken back to the palace in secret, asked to train the sultan's next generation of companions in the art of discretion and power, and a few, just a few, believe something simpler, that you walked away because no one owned you anymore, because you finally could. That, perhaps, is the most frightening version of all. In truth, your journey is far less cinematic. You walk, you sleep beneath trees. You barter food with farmers, share fires with shepherds, and leave behind nothing but footprints and short silences that people remember later without knowing why. You don't seek out conversation. But when someone needs a story, really needs one, you offer them something small. A parable. A metaphor. A question they won't be able to shake. Sometimes it's enough to plant the seed, sometimes you don't wait to see if it grows. You don't need to anymore. You arrive in a village where no one knows your face. It's nestled between low hills, ringed by olive trees and tall grass that hisses in the wind. There's one road in, 2 wells, 3 families who've lived there so long they don't bother with last names anymore. You rent a room above a woman's bakery. She has too many sons and not enough bread. You trade your skills for space, watching the youngest, teaching the oldest how to hold a pen without smudging, reminding the middle one that it's okay not to speak when there's nothing worth saying. The boys don't ask your name, they just call you lady. You don't correct them, it's easier that way. Every evening, you climb to the roof and watch the sunset stretch across the land like paint spilled from the edge of the sky. You start humming again, songs no one sung in years. Songs from chambers behind silk screens, where laughter once had to be careful and praise was always earned with shadows. Now, you hum freely, the roof is yours, the song is yours, your name is still tucked away, folded like cloth in a cedar box inside your chest. But you no longer feel the need to protect it. It isn't fragile anymore, it's just yours. One day, a girl from the next town over comes knocking. She's not young, not old. Somewhere between scared and furious. She's heard whispers, followed threads, and carried her questions across fields to find you. You know the type, you once were her. She sits across from you in the bakery, her hands trembling around a chipped cup of tea. She doesn't look at you when she speaks. There's a man. He thinks he owns me. You nod, once, not because you approve. Because you understand. She asks what to do, you don't give her an answer, you give her options. She leaves with a scarf tied around her wrist and the beginnings of a plan in her teeth. You don't ask if she'll follow through. You've learned not to measure your success by outcomes, only by offerings. A month later, she returns, this time with 2 other women. One of them carries a child, the other carries a dagger. They don't need you anymore. They only want to thank you, you. Invite them in any way. You make flatbread, teach them how to lace messages into embroidery, show the child how to fold paper into cranes. The dagger woman doesn't speak much, but before she leaves, she presses a coin into your hand, not currency, an old palace token, the kind once given to favored concubines. Your fingers close around it, not out of sentiment, out of recognition. She was there, you see it in her posture, in the way her shoulders only relax when no one's looking. You whisper, "Did you find your door?" She nods, says, "I built it." Some nights you wonder if any of the girls back in the village, your village, still wear their sashes. Whether they've passed them on. Whether they remember your stories, your riddles, the strange way you always seemed to know what they needed before they asked. You wonder if they sing the same lullabies, if they say your name, but you don't try to find out. You've made peace with being a ghost in their origin stories. That's what legends do, they fade just enough to let others shine. You spend a winter by the coast, the sea air is sharp and bracing, and your joints ache in a way that makes you feel wise, not broken. You rent a small room with blue shutters that rattle in the wind and leave salt on everything they touch. A fisherman's daughter teaches you to swim, you teach her to listen. It's a good trade, and always, always, there are stories, left for you in the form of rumors, folded notes, odd glances, women who disappear suddenly and reappear louder. Households where daughters stop apologizing, markets where poetry is whispered between spice stalls, even a rumor that the Sultan's favorite vanished one morning and left behind nothing but a sash with stars embroidered in gold. You didn't make that one up, but you might have started it. A new poem begins to circulate. This one ends with a girl walking barefoot into the night, holding her own name like a blade and a candle at the same time. No one claims to have written it, you find it. Etched into the back wall of a public bathhouse, scrawled in charcoal, half erased by steam, but still visible, you trace the lines, not to remember, to witness, to say silently to the one who wrote it, I see you. And then you walk away. One spring morning, the bakery woman tells you a strange visitor has come. He asks for no bread, he carries no sword, just an old sash in a bundle, folded and clean. He says nothing, only hands it to you and bows low, then walks away. You recognize the stitching, it's your work, but the fabric is newer. Someone's been continuing the pattern. You unfold it carefully. Inside, a note, not written. Woven, you read it with your fingers. It says, still listening, still growing, still yours. You hold it for a long time. Then add it to your scarf drawer, right between the tulip one and the one Rehan gave you. You don't cry, but your eyes feel full of something heavier than tears, something like fulfillment, like home. Years pass. You get slower, you forget the names of streets you once walked barefoot, but never the names of your girls. They come to you sometimes, older, softer, with stories of their own. One tells you she married a kind man and named her daughter after a riddle you once gave her. Another says she never married at all. That she owns a bookshop now. That she only sells stories with women at the center. You ask her what the best-selling one is. She grinds, says, it's about a concubine who never died. She just kept walking. You don't leave bed much anymore, but they come to you, one by one, carrying memories like offerings. One lays a scarf at your feet, another brings dried figs from your old garden. One girl, now a woman with silver in her braid, sings the lullaby back to you. You fall asleep to the sound of your own voice echoed through someone else's lips, and when you dream, it's not of palaces, it's of fig trees, of hands in yours. Of the world you helped build, stitch by stitch, without anyone noticing the seams. No tomb will bear your name, no statue will rise, but in courtyards across the empire, women gather under fig trees and tell stories that begin with silence and end with freedom. They don't say your name, they live it, and that, in the end, is the loudest kind of legend. And now, the voices are quiet, the fig trees sway slower, the sashes stop fluttering in the wind and settle against the earth like sleeping ribbons. The echoes of footfalls, so many years, so many girls, so many quiet rebellions, begin to fade into soft, familiar silence. No more questions now. No more riddles to solve or names to remember, just the hush that comes after the final page has been turned. You lie still, nestled in that half-dream space, where history is not a weight on your chest but a quilt across your shoulders. You're wrapped in it, not in its burdens, but in its warmth. The kind passed hand to hand, heart to heart, without anyone needing to raise their voice. The stars above the harem never stopped burning. They just moved. Now they shine quietly over gardens and rooftops far from palaces, illuminating faces that once had to bow, now tilted toward the sky, toward nothing but possibility. Maybe you hear the last whisper of a lullaby, maybe you feel the ghost of a sash draped across your legs, stitched with symbols only the quietest among us ever learned to read. You are not in a palace anymore, you are not in danger, you are not anyone's secret, you're just you, breathing slowly, safe now. Let the golden doors remain closed, let the stories rest, let the tea go cold, the fig trees will bloom again, and when they do, another girl will rise. Another voice will carry. Another story will start, not because you were remembered, but because someone, somewhere, heard the silence and knew what it meant. Now, dim the lights a little more, let the fan hum, let your thoughts soften like old silk, let go, you're home now, you made it, good night. Sweet dreams.